Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Step 3 grievance hearing to order. Um, And the first item on our agenda would be to accept the agenda for today's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the agenda for today's grievance hearing, Step 3. Is there any discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Wilson, can you come up and kind of set the stage for us, please?
This is a step 3 grievance. It's gone through step 1 that was heard by Mr. Kirk and denied. The grievance was denied. Step 2 was heard by Brian Warren and also denied. The issue is experience credit for prior employment by Ms. Trevino. Typically, the grievant on a non-termination case presents first and then we respond, but that's the status of the case.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. You all can come up now, please.
Good afternoon.
Good
My name is
afternoon.
Kevin Moran. I work for PEA. I will be presenting for Ms. Trevino. So thank you very much, and hello to everyone. We're here today to discuss the issue of experience credit for Mary Trevino, who is an LPN at Haines City High School. Mr. Trevino has a plethora of experience being an LPN, and as such has requested to gain that experience for excuse me. Mr. Trevino has a plethora of experience being an LPN, and as such has requested to gain some experience credit for her time previously employed as an LPN. First, let me say Ms. Trevino has already received a majority of experience credit for her time. The amount which we are talking about today amounts to about 2 years of experience credit. It may seem trivial, it is not. Experience credit is experience credit. If I was a LPN, I'd want as much credit as was due to me coming into any position that I took. So the argument is that Ms. Trevino was not performing her LPN duties as an LPN intake facilitator at LifePath Hospice. The district has denied Ms. Trevino based on the collective bargaining agreement language that states, and this is Article 19, Section 5. I believe in the packet you were just given, that language is in there. The language states, licensed practical nurses and certified interpreters for hearing impaired may receive experience credit only for prior employment in their field. Since Ms. Trevino was working as an LPN intake facilitator, and 2 other degrees were listed on the job description, a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Social Work, that would have been accepted for an interview and possibly the position that Ms. Trevino held, the district states that because the main duties outlined in the job description were clerical in nature, and other degrees would have been accepted for this position, Ms. Trevino has been denied her 2 years of experience. So first, let's address the contract language. The contract language says that LPNs will receive prior experience credit for employment in their field. I offer to the school board that working at a hospice center is working in an LPN's field. The language does not say employees will only receive experience credit based on only performing the duties of an LPN. Next, we're going to address the clerical responsibilities. As I mentioned before, Ms. Trevino was also denied experience credit because the duties outlined in the job description were clerical in nature. Yes, there is no denying that the duties listed on the job description were mostly clerical in nature. However, as any nurse, LPN, clinic assistant, or even doctor would tell you, if it is not documented, then it is not done. What I mean by this is there is an abundance of paperwork that medical professionals are required to fill out on an hourly basis every day. You can take a poll of your current LPNs in your schools, and I'm fairly certain that if you took your poll, you'd see that clerical responsibilities are a large part of duties that LPNs in your schools perform every day. I would argue that while Ms. Trevino was performing the LPN and clerical duties as an LPN intake facilitator in a position that was in her field of employment, per the contract language, the paperwork and clerical duties that she was required to perform in both her LPN and intake facilitator work provided her with a knowledge base and the skills for which any LPN who works with Polk County Schools would be required to have. There are clerical duties that our LPNs perform daily to an exhaustive level, and that position of LPN intake facilitator prepared Ms. Trevino extensively to become an LPN for Polk County Public Schools. To review, Article 19, Section 5 in the Collective Bargaining Agreement states licensed practical nurses and certified interpreters for the hearing impaired may receive experience credit only for experience in their field. I would submit to the school board again that Ms. Trevino's time as an LPN and LPN intake facilitator at LifePath Hospice would qualify her as working in her field. Furthermore, while the job description would have you believe that the primary responsibilities of an LPN intake facilitator are clerical in nature, her time in this position uniquely qualified Ms. Trevino to perform her LPN duties as a Polk County School Board employee, but also complete the immense amount of clerical paperwork that our LPNs in Polk County are required to perform every day. Finally, I'd like to present you with a little bit of information Ms. Trevino shared with me herself. So this is Ms. Trevino's words. Hospice is federally regulated. A certain level of education and licensing is required for certain information to be accepted. Only an RN could complete an admission to a hospice service by themselves. An LPN intake facilitator could begin the process and start to populate all relevant medical information required for intake to the hospice center. The social worker or employee with a Bachelor of Science or social work could initiate the admission by completing their areas in the packet, but would not be able to populate the medical data as an LPN or RN could. As an LPN admission intake facilitator, I could obtain all medical information, diagnosis, life expectancy, list medications with name of medication, dose, time to be given, allergies, vital signs, pain levels, assess the need for sharp containers, nebulizer, suction machines, and assess when meds might be needed to be given to alleviate symptoms like nausea, vomiting, increased secretions, constipation, and assess client diets. As I said and repeated, if a nurse does something and it is not documented, it is viewed as it is not complete. So yes, as an LPN, my job as an LPN has always included an abundance of clerical work, as well as empathetic, sympathetic, singing, computer skills, hand-holding, reading, caring, kindness, assisting with feeding, changing, making the bed, changing dressings, helping educate, answering the phone, taking messages, giving medications, along with a plethora of other things. I always do more than is asked of me. I am a good nurse. Lastly, the packet of information you were given. The very last page is a letter from Miss Linda Ward at LifePath Hospice. She goes on to state in this letter that Mary has mastered the admissions, this is in the second paragraph, Mary has mastered the admissions monthly statistical reports and generates them precisely. This is not a normal function of her position, but because of her interest, she often puts in countless extra hours to compute and complete these monthly reports. I show this and bring this out to illustrate the amount above and beyond that Mary goes to in her position, and that denying her this 2 years of experience because it is only for prior experience in their field. I would also submit to you that working at a hospice, going above and beyond, is prior experience in their field. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Don Wilson. I'm with the firm of Boswell and Dunlap here in Bartow, and I appear on behalf of the superintendent. This is a pretty straightforward case, I believe. Ms. Trevino had 6 prior jobs for which she sought experience credit, and she was given credit for 5 of those. It's only this one job at hospice that she was denied that. And we think the documentary evidence clearly supports that decision. In the packet that was handed out, the first page is the applicable provision of the collective bargaining agreement, which clearly specifies that experience credit is only given for prior employment in their field. When Ms. Trevino applied to work for the school board, a verification of non-instructional experience, that's page 2, was provided to HR on November 29th, 2016, and her job at the hospice was titled Intake Facilitator. Since all this started, the job is now referred to as LPN, Intake Facilitator, apparently, but that was not the job that she held. She was an intake facilitator. When this issue came up about whether or not she would get experience, they submitted a new page 3, a verification of non-instructional experience, and you can see LPN has been added apparently after the fact or somehow. It's obviously different than the rest of the writing on that page to the title Intake Facilitator. The information provided here was not complete, so another verification of employment form from the hospice was filed on February 23rd of this year, and again, it's and the title has changed once again. It is now LPN Admission Intake Facilitator. Page 5 is the job description from LifePath Hospice, and the title is Intake Facilitator. It is neither admissions nor LPN as part of the title. It's suggested that the job duties there are primarily not nursing duties. Well, that's an incorrect statement. The job duties listed here are exclusively non-nursing. There's no reference to any nursing duties listed in the job description. Under qualifications, the first line says the applicant must have the following: an LPN, BSW, that's a bachelor's in social work, or a BS, bachelor's in science. Nursing training was not required for this job. It just so happened that Ms. Trevino had the LPN, but that was not a requirement of the job. And if you read through the job description, there's no reference at any point to any nursing duties. Finally, on page 7 is the letter of recommendation from 2003. It talks about the good work she did at LifePath, but again, there's no reference to any nursing duties. It talks about her completing reports and compiling information, clerical type duties, but there's no reference to any nursing duties. We submit, this was reviewed twice before as we've gone through the steps of the grievance, and it's been concluded that that Ms. Trevino is not entitled to experience credit for those 2 years at the hospice. We think the documentary evidence clearly supports that conclusion, and other than what Ms. Trevino says about the job, there's no evidence or documentation supporting her position on that. And the superintendent urges that the grievance be denied. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Townsend?
What amount of money is involved in, I guess, going up 2 levels? Are we talking about a couple $100 for a para? I mean, what's the amount of money we're talking about here?
I don't know.
afternoon. Specifically, it's $1,574.
So that she would get that as like a lump sum back payment or something to that effect, or?
Yes,
or-
it will be retro to February 1st, 2017. I'm sorry, February 14th, 2017. But that's the difference in the steps.
Okay.
That's annualized too, though, right? It would just be-
Yes,
Right.
That's for a year.
that's for a year, yes,
Right.
correct. Mhm.
Right.
I don't see any other lights. So what's the pleasure of the board?
I move that we grant the grievance. I don't know, is that the appropriate motion to make? I mean,
To find in favor of the grievance?
yes.
Yes,
What's-
that is an appropriate motion.
Okay.
So you are moving to uphold the superintendent's recommendation?
No, I am not.
Okay, so you are making a motion to not approve. So, Mr. Burgess, what is
Yes. The motion is to grant the grievance.
Okay,
to-
all right.
To uphold the grievance.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we grant the grievance. Ms. Cunningham?
Just want to say a few comments, I guess. Boy, are we splitting hairs here today. Oh, my gosh. I mean, you're talking the difference between the way that it's written in language, as far as prior employment in her field. I understand that as an intake facilitator, she performed clerical duties in nature. But I would assume that because she had the LPN behind her name, that she may have been chosen, if I can say this, above and beyond someone who had the other two, BSW or BS, because we're at a hospice facility. So this is a hard one for me because I would imagine that she would have to perform nursing duties as well as the clerical duties. I mean, just hearing it all. And I understand that when we look at these types of things, we are looking at dotting every I and crossing every T. And, normally it's black and white, but in this particular case, I'm seeing shades of gray. And it's really hard, I'm going to be honest with you, because I wanted to do what's right for you. And I also was wondering what the financial amount would be differently, and we're talking $1,000 and $1 billion budget for a family based on skills that, she probably did there, whether they were literally written into the, we all have those job descriptions, and then it says, and anything else that your supervisor requires or asks of you. I mean, my employees have that. So, while I understand the intent and the letter of this whole thing, golly, it's just really hard for me. This is just a really hard one for all of those reasons. I hope other school board members weigh in. Thank you.
Mr. Harris and then Ms. Ehlers.
I agree with Ms. Cunningham that it does seem in this case that it is splitting hairs. But what I have to go on is the job description from Life Hospice, and looking at the admissions, the responsibilities, and I read through all of those bullet points, I have to agree that there doesn't seem to be any kind of nursing requirement, but more in line with a clerical kind of position rather than a nursing type position. Even though, from what I'm gathering, there probably were functions that she did that were leaning toward the nursing side, the responsibilities for the job do not in any way appear to require a nursing activity or nursing background. While it's a $1,500 impact for this one employee, as a board, we have to also be cognizant of the fact that we set precedent when we make some of these decisions. And in this case, it might be that this would impact many others besides this one individual employee if we were to go against the recommendation of the superintendent. Thank you.
Ms. Ahlers?
I have the same difficulty everybody else has. One very disturbing fact was the addition, because I even read the letter of recommendation. It calls the position an admissions intake facilitator. And I too am disturbed that after the fact, that it was tried to be changed to an LPN intake facilitator. That swayed me worse than anything, because it doesn't look like that was your official title at the time you had the job. I don't understand, as I'm reading in other places, that maybe your former employer decided to change it. I don't know, but it doesn't look like it was the official title. Until then, you can speak when. But I understand. I have the same concerns. If we've only given across the board credit for being an LPN, it is going to be very difficult for us to change and start allowing other jobs that LPNs have done. I don't know what the impact is going backward, retro, and forward. And if the intention, which I can only rely on our employer, our HR department, was only to give credit for being an actual LPN, I would have to say I cannot vote to give credit, because I know the unintended consequences. Not that we don't understand and know that you're probably an exemplary employee, but that's what I need to hear. What has the intention always been to only give credit for being employed as an LPN? Because if that's how we have maintained historically and intend to go forward, we cause unintentional consequences when emotionally we can understand that you probably very well did some other jobs, but if you weren't employed as an LPN and we've only given credit as an LPN, that's where I have to stand, because I know what a mess we open up when we start trying to be compassionate and emotional about wanting to do good things for people. And that's where I need to hear from HR, and then I know they want to respond, because I was very concerned about what looked like a changed title, because I couldn't find it in other places. Thank you.
Ms. Sellers, yes, you are correct. Generally, specifically when we do review the job descriptions of candidates coming from the outside and their previous experience, we look for specifically that experience. In this case, it's an LPN, so we were looking for directly for LPN experience, even though she does have some clerical, or she's doing clerical work. Based on her previous job description, that was mainly clerical in nature. It wasn't any LPN main duties, or as main duties.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Can he come up and explain?
Thank you. Just two quick things. Ms. Trevino's badge that she wore at work, much like we wear badges every day, actually said on her badge, LPN, Admission Intake Facilitator. That was the badge she wore to work every single day. I leave you with that. I also, second point here, Ms. Sellers, the contract language does not say only experience of LPNs will be accepted. The contract language says credit only for prior employment in their field. And I would submit to you that working in a hospice as an LPN, Admission Intake Facilitator, is in field. I believe in field is the crux of this argument.
All right, we have, I think, Ms. Reynolds, and then Mr. Wilson, and then Mr. Townsend.
The point that he made was exactly what I was going to say, is that it actually says 19.5 that it's prior employment in their field. If historically we've always held it as an LPN, that's one thing, but that's not what it says here. So in the future, if that is what we mean by that, then I feel that we need to say that in the contract, that I can't vote to uphold the superintendent's recommendation when that's not what it says here. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
I find this to be a very gray area as well, and I guess my greatest concern is, as Mrs. Sellers and Mr. Harris have indicated, are we opening a door for all of our employees to come back and question their contracts? That's of great concern to me. However, it also appears quite probable that the employee did provide or did engage in those services that would qualify for the additional experience. So it's a very difficult situation. I guess I think it would have been helpful if we had seen from our employee, and by the way, thank you for your service. Please be assured this has nothing to do whatsoever with your employment here. It's simply trying to find something that we can move forward with. But I think it would have been helpful if there had been something provided from your prior employee that had said, that you did provided those services. I think that would have been very helpful. Would it be okay if she spoke? Would that be appropriate for the employee to come forward and answer a question? Would you like to answer that?
Sure. I've been a nurse since '93. My whole nursing career, I've always learned. Everywhere I went, I learned. Clinics, I learned. OBGYN, I learned. Hospice, I learned. Hospice was hard. I had to leave. It's not an easy job. It's not. I just want credit for what I've earned. I'm not opening doors. I'm not trying to have a rush of people rush up to you, but if they've earned it, give it to them. That's all I say is if they've earned it, give it to them. It's just about money. We all work for money. But if they've earned it, give it to them. Give it to me. I'm a good nurse. I mean, you're lucky to have me. I'm a good nurse. I do my best. I do more than is asked of me.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
When did you begin your employment with the district?
September of last year.
Of last year?
Yes.
Okay. Did you bring this forward immediately, or?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I was trying to get it in before my 90 days, but the first lady didn't fill out the paperwork properly. That's why it didn't have the correct writing of my title. I had to find my badge from my stuff that I kept at home. And I provided her the badge, and I told her, look, this was my title, LPN Admission Intake Facilitator. I continually emailed Ms. Jones, Human Resources, and I told her, look, this is my title. And they said, well, if you can't prove it, I found my badge. When I found my badge, I sent it in. I sent my job description from 2003. That's my paper, because my company that I worked for didn't have it. They didn't have it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I see other lights, but I think that's the thing that I wanted to know. Did we reach out to your former employer to see if they could verify exactly what your duties were? Ms. Tedra, do you know if anyone did that?
Yes, we did. I'm assuming, I'm sorry. Can I have Paula come up and speak? Hold on for 1 second.
Good afternoon. When the experience first came to my attention as to whether to approve it or not, I did ask for the personnel assistant or the senior technician that was taking care of that to please ask for the job description, because we wanted to give her credit for it. And so with having a title of intake facilitator, we needed to know what the duties were. And I said, if the job description requires an LPN license, or if the job description does have duties that are LPN related, then we certainly will give it to her. So then we received the job description trying to help her out, hoping we could give her experience, it came back as didn't have LPN on it, and there was no duties in that. And so I understand that although it is in a hospital, in her field, but there's also secretaries that work at a hospital. And let's just say if they get their license, we wouldn't give them any LPN experience, even though they were working in a hospital, but doing clerical duties. So we apply the same process and methodology to all of our employees for their experience. And so this would be a break from what we normally would do, because it would be for just LPN experience. Thank you.
And my question is, and maybe I wasn't clear on my question is, did anybody pick up the phone and call the former employer and say, this lady is saying she did thus, thus, and thus. Is there anyone there that can verify that that happened? Did anybody on our staff do that?
No, ma'am, we did not reach back to the employer. We reached back to the employee. They provide the verification of experience forms to us. And then if we need additional information, then we reach back to the employee and ask them for whatever it is that we need to provide them with the credit. And that's what we did. We asked if they could provide a job description. We'll be happy to provide credit, to give her credit for it, if the job description does indeed. It's always back through the employee who reaches back to their employer, whether it's one employer or 5 employers. They're the ones that reach back for the experience. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one more other thing, and then I see other lights. My concern is pretty much similar to Ms. Sellers and Mr. Harris. If we do this for one, then what are we doing as it relates to impacting future situations that's similar to this? On the other hand, I have a concern that we didn't reach back and that we didn't talk to somebody in person and to find out exactly what the duties would entail. So I'm struggling right now, trying to figure out exactly what I need to do as it relates to the vote. And you can't fix that, Ms. Tedra. I'm just saying that. But if you want to say something, you're more than welcome to.
I just wanted to say, historically, we don't contact the employers, the employee's previous employer. We normally do that through the employee, as Ms. Paula has said. In this case, that's what we did. Regarding the impact on other positions, what we'll have to do, if this is the desire of the board, we'll have to really change our own personnel or salary guidelines and how we compute salaries and what we look at when we're computing salaries. So it will have an impact. I'm not sure what that direct impact will be in terms of money, but it will have an impact in terms of the way we do our business and the way we operate.
Thank you. Yes.
It seems to me that may be going a little bit above and beyond. You have Article 19, Section 5, that I've referenced a few times, that says experience credit only for prior employment in field. It seems to me that if you want to only give experience for LPN credit, then you could go to the bargaining table and bargain for different language. I don't know that adjusting, that's not my job, so I won't go there. I will simply state that if you would like language that says LPNs doing only LPN work, that could be bargained at the bargaining table. That is not what this language in front of you states. The language in front of you states that experience credit will be given only for experience in field, and that is what we are looking at. Ms. Trevino had multiple years of experience in field, including these 2 years.
Mr. Wilson, is your light still on?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to vote in favor of this motion in support of our employee, but I'd like to say this. I don't see this as being a circumstance where our HR department did anything wrong. I think they did everything exactly as they were supposed to. I think the language was just fine. I think this is just a very rare situation where everything just landed in the most impossible the most impossible circumstances for everybody involved. And I want to make it very clear publicly that this vote does not suggest that I will vote in favor of these types of situations in the future. it would be my inclination to uphold the superintendent's recommendation on behalf of our district and our HR department. But I just see this as being a very rare case, and so I hope it would be construed in that way. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bridges?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would suggest to you that you read the language in paragraph 19.5 of the paraeducator article, and read the entire sentence, because it I think if you read the context of the sentence, it will become clear to you what it means. Licensed practical nurses and certified interpreters for the hearing impaired may receive experience credit only for prior employment in their field. My interpretation of what I believe is the plain language, that means a licensed practical nurse receives experience credit only for prior employment in the LPN field. Certified interpreters for the hearing impaired receive experience credit only for prior employment in their field. You're dealing with two different types of healthcare providers there. Each receives credit for service in their field. So if you would, I would suggest to you that you read the sentence in context for the meaning of that provision.
Thank you. Mr. Townsend?
Okay. Sort of a specific point about this case, and then a general point beyond that. The first specific point is, I'm blanking on your name. Vino, thank you. She was at all times, when she was employed here, a licensed practicing nurse. She was in the healthcare field, which hospice certainly is. She has been checked out in 5 other places, and her claims about her background checked out. She has told us that her badge said LPN intake person. Moreover, she testified that she took a patient's blood pressure, temperature, and having been in some hospitals with my parents, myself, recently, I know how much documentation and clerical work goes into the fundamentals of nursing. I think we do have a bit of an issue. I mean, I'm concerned about the last sentence in this discussion here, where it says the only evidence supporting the grievant is her self-serving testimony that at times she took a patient. Self-serving is how we referred to that. If we don't have any problem with the truthfulness of Mr. Vino, if we don't have any problem with how she's performing, we really shouldn't use that kind of language. Could have been unverified or independently documented, or it could have just been her testimony. You know, we didn't have to characterize her testimony there. I could say, I believe you. I believe you're telling the truth about what you've done. So I am strongly in support of granting this grievance. That's point one. The larger general point sort of relates to the point Lynn just made, and also to the point Score Member Harris made about unintended consequences. The unintended consequences of treating employees this way, of being this petty with the language we use, of fighting over this, is what leads us to have 1,200 people that we need to hire before the school year starts next year. We have much greater unintended consequences from being a place that is perceived, rightly or wrongly, as not particularly friendly to its employees. We have got to change that culture. This is, I don't fault you guys. I know this is what you've been told to do over the years. That you're in the business of looking out for the taxpayers' interest and looking out for the board's interest, but you've been given a very, very narrow conception of what looking out for the taxpayers' interest is. The taxpayers want good employees who are happy to come to work, who feel like they are valued here, and that's the wider reason that I'm supporting your grievance. I also specifically support your grievance, but I think we have to think about it. We have to change that culture. We have to make our people believe that we're not going to nickel and dime them to death over over things that happened 16 years ago when there's every indication she's telling the truth. That's stakeholder management, and we have to get better at it. Thank you.
Yes.
Looking at the broader picture, I think we really are getting ready to change the paradigm under which people are granted experience credit. All we have here, all the documentation indicates there was no nursing duties. All we have here is the employee's indication that she did that. Let's say I'm applying for a plumber's job and I'd worked 10 years as a carpenter, but I said, oh, I did plumbing duties also. I mean, when you're doing a construction job, you do both. Is that all it takes to get 10 years credit as a plumber? And you also have to understand the people doing this work. As to Ms. Fields' questions, I don't know how many thousands of applications we get every year for jobs, but I don't think you've provided HR with staff to go out and research the background of each one. We do depend on the employee to provide that information. And if y'all decide today that this case was sufficient to grant the experience credit, and I worked in HR next time it came along, if the employee says they did it, apparently that's all it takes. So you're getting ready to sort of change how the system works. And that's, y'all the school board and you run it, but you do need to think of the long-term effect of decisions like this. Thank you.
There are quite a few lights on, but Mr. Wilson, I want to make sure I clarify something. I don't expect for the staff to call behind everyone, but what I was saying is with a grievance before us, it would have been nice had somebody specifically for this situation, not for everyone, picked up the phone and called to get clarity. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that I clarify that.
Okay.
And human resources staff, we know you guys have a great job. And we appreciate what you do. And you're not going to please everybody. But as long as you do what's right, that's all you can do. I just want to encourage you all. I really do. Thank you. All right, Ms. Cunningham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, when we talked about her position description very quickly, in reading the information that I have before me, it indicates in the qualifications that you have to have one of the following, and she did, the LPN. And then it says minimum of 1 year human services, social work, or clinical services experience. And I would imagine in the other jobs, okay, you can say that it's human services and social work, but primarily being an LPN, I would imagine the clinical services experience is what kind of probably rose to the table. And then secondly, down on the last bullet, works under limited supervision, exercise some degree of discretion, and then the words clinical judgment in decision-making. To be able to give clinical judgment, you would have to have some type of LPN type degree to be able to do that. And again, having lost a family member to hospice only 2 weeks ago, it's amazing what those people go through and what you have to learn and know. So, and once again, I feel, as I said in my first statement, this is very difficult. I personally don't feel that we're setting a precedent today. What I would have liked to have happened is similar to what Ms. Fields is saying, not for every person that comes through the door, but if we're going through a step 2 grievance and about to come to the board, it would be nice if we'd have reached out to those folks and said, was she just at the, computer all day answering the phones? Did she step out of that duty because she had that ability and that's why you hired her, because of that expertise? And I feel like we got to take care of our people. So I don't feel like we're setting a precedence. I feel like we have to do the right thing with each situation that arises. The only thing that we need to do moving forward with this language, if need be, would be to, prior employment in their field of specifically, as an LPN or a certified interpreter and no other title to be accepted or something like that, to tighten that, because it does leave it open. Mr. Bridges, I'm sorry, I can read very well and comprehend the English language, but there's room in there. So I will be supporting this grievance as well. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome. Ms. Sellers?
Thank you. Emotionally, I would love to support this for all of the reasons that you've heard from other people. I want to give our employees as much money as possible. That's why I asked historically what was this statement, because many times in sitting here learning about laws and statutes, you need to go back and see what the spirit of the law or statute was. I do believe that in this county, we've held that to mean employment as a licensed practical nurse. And so I would have the other way. If we feel that this sort of experience should be given credit, I would say we would need to say employment in their field or related field. If that had been in here, I would have gone with it, and I'm not opposed to us opening up and changing if we have that inclination to want to give credit for a more expanded or related field. But right now, because historically we've considered that, and unfortunately it was put with two different jobs, and that's why it said prior in their field, but I do believe that we've always held that to be a job as a licensed practical nurse from what our HR has told us. And so therefore, unless we change this to and related fields, I don't see how I can not support the superintendent's position or recommendation to deny this grievance. Not easy, because I understand. I'm so thankful we have people like you in our system willing to work. Every medical person we have, I know what our pay scale is, and we're blessed to have you. But I understand also what was meant by this statement. I read it as meaning, and once again, I don't know why the two were together, and that's what made the language different, but the spirit of the law meant that you had to be a licensed practical nurse. Thank you for your service too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. Mr. Townsend?
Just two quick things. One, she did not work in a 7-Eleven. She worked in a hospice facility. LPN is not a field. LPN is a credential. It's a job designation. It's a title. Healthcare is a field. That's point one. Two, if we get in the future someone whose previous job experience every other place has checked out, who was a licensed LPN, and they were working in a dermatologist's office or something like that, I'll be happy to support that grievance too. I mean, it's not just her word, even though I take her word. There is a predicate upon which her word is built that is solid. The only anti-predicate to it is we have some concern over what the job title was listed on a bureaucratic piece of paper. Those are my 2 points. We don't need to belabor this further. We should just vote. But sorry, thank you.
I agree with you 100%. We do need to vote, because we've chewed this up and down, and we do need to vote. So now I'm calling for the vote, and the motion on the floor is to support the agreement. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
So we have 3 nays and 4 yeas, so the motion carries. If nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.